Hello everyone. Today, for this market tidbits, we are going to talk about mobility in China. Mobility is a big thing. We are seeing in the world Uber, but in China we are seeing Didi, and Didi won the battle over Uber in China, taking actually some shares worldwide, and Uber sitting at the board of Didi in China. But the market of mobility is much bigger than only one player, only Didi. And you have uh, ride hailing, but also food delivery and many other segments. So what when we talk about mobility, Alison, what are we talking about?
So I would define mobility as services related to getting things from point A to point B. So this is ride hailing, like you mentioned, Didi. This is also food delivery, and this is also parcel delivery. And so this is companies that have the infrastructure to get things from point A to point B, whether it's with a car or with a scooter. And so often what we will see is these companies, they will try to get onto each other's territory. So in the West, we do have Uber, which now does food delivery, but in China, we have not had as successful of a case of a ride-hailing company getting into food delivery and vice versa. So it's all parts of mobility are pretty interesting and dynamic and competitive. And so we looked at the different barriers and the different market dynamics of each sector of the mobility market.
What about the numbers? For China, every time we look at China, we talk about numbers, usually big numbers, but surprisingly sometimes numbers are not as high as we would expect. For instance, that's the case when we look at the Chinese traveler, even if 2020 is very special, but even for 2019, it has always been less than what people would expect based on population 1.4 billion. Is it the case for ride-hailing market and mobility? Are we talking about sizable numbers, or is still in infancy?
Well, I do have some big numbers to share with you. So, um, at the most, the mobility market reached just over 400 million ride-hailing users. So that's about a third of China's population. So that's pretty sizable. But I think what we do see is that this is definitely it's very saturated in the high tier cities and big cities, but there's a lot of room to grow in tier 3 and tier 4 cities. For food delivery, reaches even more people. So there's at the end of 2019, there was about 460 million Chinese food delivery consumers, which is a couple dozen million more than ride hailing. So it has a little bit more market penetration. And of course, parcel delivery, that is simply using the mail. So that service has been around for a long time. So it also has a very high market penetration, but what we see is people in low tier cities are less likely to use some of the more unique services that deliver across a city. And they're more likely to just use the regular services that everybody already uses, which is to send things to other cities across the country.
So the new mobility tools, which are decentralized through an app, um, are, are actually widely used in China. When we look at the numbers, where you say 300, 400 million, depending on what service we are talking about, it's basically the size of the middle class in China. It's basically half of the size of urban population. And when we talk about urban population, we talk about senior people, we talk about children. So what will not use them. So basically, the penetration is very, very high within cities. We can say that it's close to saturation even when we look at adult population. When we look at the drivers, so you talked about the users. What about the drivers? Because as far as I understand, it's not a full-time job. You might have a lot of people doing that part-time or even doing that sometime in their life. How many people are you talking about, and what kind of demographics?
So we have an estimated 30 million registered drivers operating in the market. So that's about a little bit more than the population of Shanghai, and that's for the whole country. So, and the drivers, they tend to be a little bit older than the passengers. The average passenger age is from 21 to 40 years old, but then the drivers usually from 31 to 40 years old. Yes, it's not always a full-time job, and it is a little bit of a gig economy. So there's some flexibility in the market, but it's pretty there's a lot of diversity between the different ride-hailing brands, um, in the way that they hire drivers and the amount of drivers that they have.
That's something which surprised me. In our research, we looked at a player called Cacao, and it seems that they are the eco-friendly competitor.
Yeah.
Is it something in China that people would consider before taking a car, if it's an eco-friendly or if it's have an impact on society, saying that they have a bit more female users? Is it something happening in China?
So I think in this case, yeah, the company you're talking about, Caocao Chuxing, they are a little bit smaller and they do focus on eco-friendly car hailing services for both individuals and enterprises. And they do proportionally have more female users, whereas competitors like Didi and Didi Chuxing both have more male users. So it is a very interesting trend. We will see where it goes. Some could argue that the eco-friendly consumption is a part of the consumption upgrade, where not only do you want to buy things that are nicer for yourself, but you also want to have a guilt-free consciousness. And I also think that China has a lot of it has a big initiative to have a lot of electric vehicles on the streets, and there's a lot of incentives from the government to have more electric vehicles. And so I think they're very in fashion right now, and anything that's eco-friendly is is becoming fashionable. So we'll see where that goes in the future.
It would be interesting case to follow indeed. I see that the market would switch to a more eco-friendly if in terms of pricing, in terms of offering is similar. There is interest in doing good and having an impact, positive impact in society indeed. Would be good to follow up on Cacao. What other elements are in the to analyze the market? So we look at individuals for their own travel. There is another segment which is food delivery, another segment which is parcel delivery. How do you analyze the food delivery market and how is it impacted by COVID? That's one of the market which might have been positively impacted.
So the food delivery market, it's dominated by two main players, which is Ulima and Meituan. And so, yeah, during COVID-19, it was still negatively impacted in a way because overall people were eating out less, whether that's delivery or just eating out. But the proportion of eating restaurant food was way more on the side of delivery. So it is not as hurt as restaurants were, but it could have started off a trend of maybe acquiring a lot of new users, first time users who have now downloaded the app. The friction is of downloading the app is deleted, and so they can just use it a second, third, fourth time very easily, even though the pandemic is over in China.
That's a very good point, actually. It's very hard to get people download your app. It's very hard to push them reusing it. But the first step is to get them download the app, and that might have happened with COVID. And I remember that in one of the reports we tried to understand how COVID would impact you, and we got something wrong. It was the fact that food delivery grew bigger for them, at least was a very good substitute for the closing of their restaurant. Do you have a bit more insight on what Yum did?
Yeah, so Yum China, which owns KFC and Pizza Hut in China, they have multiple forms of delivery, and so they started doing delivery as early as 2001, and in 2015 they finally started using Meituan and Ele.me. So they were already doing delivery before it was the cool thing to do. And currently they use a hybrid delivery model, which means that they get the orders from third-party platforms like Meituan and Ele.me, but then they use their own delivery driver. So in China, you will still see like a Pizza Hut driver driving around. And so because of this, they get the best of both worlds with the visibility of third-party apps, but then they also save the cost when they use their own logistics system.
True. Actually, the Meituan and Ele.me are not only proxies for deliveries, they are also a proxy to get clients, because people find their restaurants and the dishes they would get to get delivered on the app.
Right, yeah, and so this gives Yum China's restaurants a lot of visibility because you might hop on the app not knowing what to eat, and you'll see Pizza Hut or KFC, and you'll think, okay, that sounds good. And if you choose them, that gives them a lot of visibility. Whereas but then they also at the same time they don't pay the cost of having Ele.me or Meituan do the delivery for them because they have their own delivery drivers.
And Meituan and Ele.me is counting for 90% of the market share for food delivery, as it is written in our report. Is it representing again the fight between the two giants, Tencent and Alibaba, behind those two players?
Yes, so Meituan and Ele.me are both backed by giants. Meituan is backed by Tencent and Ele.me is backed by Alibaba. So it is another way for the big tech battle in China to play out.
For parcel delivery, I feel the game is a bit different because it seems to have grown earlier. I've been a bit less impacted by new players, startups, scale-ups, like Meituan, like Didi, but grew more with let's say, post-internet, pre-internet, sorry, pre-internet or older players like SF, Shunfeng Express. Is my understanding correct? And how is it playing? How has the dynamics in the parcel delivery?
The parcel delivery, in contrast to food delivery, has a very low market concentration. So the largest competitor is SF Express, and they only take 15% of the market. So there's a lot of different delivery companies that, and they all cost about the same, which is pretty cheap. And what's interesting about delivery is our focus for our research was not just on the companies themselves, but mostly on the new developments happening in the parcel delivery market. And some of those developments are self-service mailboxes and a new service called FlashX, which is a way to deliver documents across a city instead of having it sent in the formal mail. So it's using the same kind of idea of food delivery, where you just have a driver on a scooter get from point A to point B, and you are the only person whose goods they're handling.
What other challenges do you see in the industry?
So I think for the parcel delivery, for one, going on FlashX, their business model, they do face a lot of challenges. Firstly, the insufficient laws in China. It is not really clear legally. It is not really clear what types of goods they are handling, and so if the goods are damaged or if the consumer needs to make a complaint, it is a little bit unclear how do they go about doing that, who should pay for it, and who has the rights to the refund. It's it's not as straightforward as regular mail like SF, but the bonus on the other side being it'll only take a half day to get your goods delivered. Um, and then also for FlashX and new, more innovative services like that is that in lower tier cities, people are less likely to use it because they only have to walk a couple blocks across the city or bike across the city to get the good delivered. So why would they pay for somebody else to do that? Versus in Shanghai, oftentimes people are very busy with long work days and lots of different activities and spending time with family. And the city can be it's a pretty big city, and so I think there's more potential for Flash X first in the large cities, definitely, but there's really not as much hope in lower tier cities. And that's kind of the trend that we see with a lot of these mobility apps, like ride hailing and food delivery and the new parcel delivery technologies, is that they are they have less consumption in lower tier cities.
Interesting. Indeed, regulation is something a lot of few reports are looking at when they analyze the market, but that's very impacting how easy people transact. And Taobao was great at making transaction possible. And for those kind of accidents where delivery is not in satisfactory condition, indeed, it's not very clear who is responsible and what to do. That's still things that have to progress within Chinese market and actually changing currently. When we look at the future, any insight on the self-driving car or any new technology coming up, like delivery by drones or self-driving car, or is it's more about advertising so far?
The research that we have done is more examining the current market. Um, there has been some use of delivery drones, especially in Wuhan during the initial outbreak of COVID-19. Um, I believe it was JD actually used drones to deliver some hospital equipment. So I think that drones, they're pretty close, and it seems that the technology is there, but they just need to maybe sort out some safety and some um, legal issues, like what are the risks of having drones flying over people's heads, and what if it drops something? So there's a lot of risk there that they need to sort out in order for people to be comfortable enough to use them on a regular basis.
True. That would be the next step of a very exciting innovation in this industry. Thank you, Alison, for being with us. And you can find the report on SlideShare and also on our website. What's the name of the report exactly?
It's just called Mobility in China.
Okay. Thank you very
Yep.
much, Alison.
Yep. Thank you.